The shocking reason European cities are packed like sardines. Stop scrolling right now. I'm about to show you something that will completely change how you see every European city forever. Look at this image of Paris. Now look at this image of suburban Dallas. What you're seeing isn't just different architecture. What you're seeing is the result of one of the most brutal survival strategies in human history. A strategy so desperate, so ingenious that it literally shaped the stones beneath millions of people's feet for over 1,000 years. Every narrow street in Europe tells a story of life and death. Every building pressed wall to wall whispers secrets of medieval terror. And every cozy cafe squeezed into an impossibly tight corner exists because of decisions made by people who were literally fighting for their lives. Today, I'm going to reveal why European cities look like they were designed by someone playing the world's most intense game of Tetris. And trust me, the real reason will shock you. Picture yourself walking through the heart of Rome in the year 400 AD. You're strolling down marble boulevards wider than modern highways. Magnificent temples and bathhouses stretch as far as the eye can see. Aqueducts bring fresh water from hundreds of miles away. Public forums buzz with merchants trading silk from China and spices from India. This is the pinnacle of urban civilization. Home to over 1 million people living in luxury that wouldn't be matched for centuries. Now fast forward just 100 years to the year 500. You're standing in the exact same spot, but everything has changed. The marble has been stripped away. The aqueducts are broken. Weeds grow through cracked stones. Maybe a few hundred people huddle in makeshift shelters, scavenging among the ruins of what was once the greatest city on earth. What happened? The Roman Empire didn't just decline. It collapsed so completely that urban civilization itself almost disappeared from Europe. Barbarian invasions, economic collapse, political chaos, and the rise of Islam shut down the trade routes that had kept cities alive. For almost 600 years, Europe entered what we call the Dark Ages. And it was literally dark because there were no cities left to light up. But around the year 1000 AD, something miraculous began to happen. The climate warmed up, making farming more productive. Populations started growing again. Trade routes slowly reopened. And for the first time in centuries, new cities began to emerge across Europe. But these weren't going to be anything like the grand Roman cities of the past. These new medieval cities were born in a world of absolute terror. Viking raiders could appear at any moment, burning and pillaging everything in their path. Noble lords waged constant wars against each other, treating peasants and townspeople as expendable resources. Bandits and mercenaries roamed the countryside, robbing anyone foolish enough to travel without protection. In this nightmare world, if you wanted to build a city, you had exactly one priority: survival. So every single medieval town, no matter how small, surrounded itself with massive stone walls. These weren't decorative barriers. These were fortress walls 20 feet high and 10 feet thick, topped with battlements and guard towers, surrounded by water-filled moats and bristling with deadly spikes. Building these walls required years of back-breaking labor and consumed enormous amounts of money and resources. And here's where the story gets really interesting. Once you built those walls, you were trapped by them. Expanding the walls was incredibly expensive and dangerous. You had to tear down existing fortifications, leaving your city vulnerable while new walls were built. Most cities could afford to expand their walls maybe once or twice in their entire history. That was it. But populations were growing rapidly. Trade was bringing wealth and opportunity. People were desperate to get inside the safety of the city walls, where they could make money, practice their crafts, and live under the protection of law and order. So medieval cities faced an impossible choice: limit their population and miss out on prosperity, or find a way to pack more and more people into the same protected space. The solution was as simple as it was dramatic. Build everything as close together as humanly possible. If you owned property inside the city walls, you didn't waste a single square inch. Houses were built wall to wall with no gaps between them. Streets became narrow corridors just wide enough for a cart to pass through. Buildings shot upward, sometimes 4 or 5 stories tall, in an age when most of the world built single-story structures. But wait, it gets even more fascinating. Medieval property taxes created some of the most bizarre architectural decisions in history. In many cities, your tax was based on how much of your building faced the main street. The logic was that street-facing property was the most valuable because that's where customers could see your shop and where you could display your wealth and status. So what did clever medieval property owners do? They built their houses as narrow as physically possible facing the street, sometimes just wide enough for a single door and one window. Then they stretched their buildings back as deep as their property would allow, creating houses that looked absolutely ridiculous from the outside, but actually maximized living space while minimizing taxes. In Amsterdam, this got completely out of hand. Since Amsterdam was built on canals, the most valuable property faced the water, and taxes were assessed based on canal frontage. Amsterdam houses became so ridiculously narrow that some are only 8 feet wide. They're so skinny that furniture can't fit up the staircases and has to be hoisted through windows using pulley systems that you can still see on the buildings today. But medieval density wasn't just about defense and taxes. It was also about surviving the brutal European winters without modern heating. When houses are pressed wall to wall, they share heat. Your neighbor's fireplace warms your walls. The body heat from dozens of families and connected buildings creates pockets of warmth that could mean the difference between life and death in January. The narrow, winding streets weren't just more defensible. They were also more confusing to enemies who somehow managed to breach the walls. Invading armies could get lost in the maze of twisting alleys, allowing defenders to ambush them or escape through hidden passages that connected buildings across multiple streets. Markets and workshops clustered together, because in a world without cars or modern transportation, every step mattered. If you were a blacksmith, you needed to live next to other metal workers who could share tools, techniques, and raw materials. If you were a cloth merchant, you had to be close to weavers, dyers, and tailors. Entire streets became specialized. Bread Street for bakers, Goldsmith Lane for jewelers, Butcher Row for meat sellers. Guild systems developed that actually required members of the same profession to live and work in the same neighborhoods. This wasn't just convenience, it was law. The result was cities that were incredibly dense, but also incredibly efficient, where everything you needed for daily life was within a 5-minute walk. But this desperate strategy for survival came at a horrific price that most modern people can barely imagine. Fire was a constant, devastating threat in cities where wooden buildings touched each other, and open flames provided all heating, cooking, and lighting. When fire started in one building, it could race through entire neighborhoods in minutes, destroying the life's work of thousands of families in a single night. The Great Fire of London in 1666 destroyed over 13,000 houses and 87 churches, precisely because the medieval city layout made firefighting almost impossible. Narrow streets meant fire wagons couldn't get through. Buildings pressed together meant flames could jump from roof to roof faster than people could run. Disease spread through dense medieval cities like wildfire through dry grass. The Black Death, which killed 1/3 of Europe's entire population in the 14th century, was particularly devastating in urban areas where rats, fleas, and infected people were packed together in conditions that were perfect for spreading plague. And speaking of horrific conditions, let me paint you a picture of medieval city sanitation that will make your stomach turn. There was no plumbing, no sewage systems, no garbage collection. People dumped their chamber pots directly into the streets. Butchers threw animal waste into the alleys. Rain would wash all of this disgusting mess downhill, creating literal rivers of human and animal waste flowing through the heart of the city. The smell alone would be overwhelming to any modern person. Medieval cities stank so badly that wealthy people carried small bouquets of flowers and herbs to hold under their noses when walking through the streets. Yet despite these absolutely horrible living conditions, people kept crowding into cities. Why? Because cities were where the money was, where opportunities existed, where a poor person could potentially change their life through trade, craftsmanship, or commerce. The walls that created all these problems were also what made prosperity possible. Inside the walls, law and order could be maintained. Contracts could be enforced. Merchants could invest in businesses without worrying about bandits stealing everything they owned. Cities became islands of civilization and opportunity in an ocean of medieval chaos and violence. As centuries passed and military technology advanced, the walls that had shaped European cities became completely obsolete. Cannons could blast through stone fortifications that had protected cities for hundreds of years. Gunpowder made medieval walls as useless as paper barriers. Many European cities made the smart decision to tear down their old walls and expand outward into the countryside. Vienna turned its medieval walls into the famous Ringstrasse, a beautiful circular boulevard lined with grand museums and opera houses. Paris demolished its walls and created the wide boulevards and spacious squares that tourists love today. But here's the absolutely remarkable thing. Even when the walls came down, the dense urban core remained exactly the same. Those narrow streets that had been created by necessity became beloved neighborhood features. Those wall-to-wall buildings that had been designed for survival became charming architectural treasures. Those tiny squares that had been accident of medieval property lines became intimate gathering places where neighbors could meet and socialize. The survival strategy of medieval Europe had become the lifestyle choice of modern Europe. And there's a very good reason why. The dense, walkable neighborhoods that had been created by medieval constraints turned out to be incredibly pleasant places to live. Everything you needed was within walking distance. You knew your neighbors because you saw them every day on the narrow streets. Local businesses thrived because they had built-in customers who lived just steps away. Walk through the center of any major European city today, and you'll discover that these medieval neighborhoods command the highest real estate prices, attract the youngest and most educated residents, and generate more economic activity per square foot than any other part of the city. The areas that tourists love most are exactly the same areas that locals fight to live in. Meanwhile, American cities that were built after the invention of cars took a completely different approach. With no walls to constrain them, with no enemies to fear, American cities could sprawl outward indefinitely. Wide streets, large lots, plenty of space between buildings, and endless suburban neighborhoods stretching to the horizon. Both approaches have their advantages, but there's something almost magical about the European solution. These cities prove that incredible beauty can emerge from desperate circumstances, that some of humanity's most beloved places were created by people who had no choice but to build this way. Every narrow street in Europe tells the story of a medieval merchant who needed to get his goods to market safely. Every wall-to-wall building represents a family trying to maximize their space while minimizing their tax burden. Every winding alley is the result of property negotiations between neighbors who had to make every square foot count. The cities we admire today for their beauty, their charm, their perfect human scale, were actually created by people fighting for survival in the most dangerous period in European history. They were shaped by constraints so severe that we can barely imagine them. Constant warfare, crushing poverty, devastating diseases, and the ever-present threat of violent death. Yet somehow, out of these desperate circumstances, Medieval Europeans created urban environments that are still considered among the most beautiful and livable places on Earth. They prove that necessity truly is the mother of invention, and that ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges can create something magnificent. So the next time you're walking through Prague or Amsterdam or Florence, remember that every stone around you was placed by someone fighting for their life. Those romantic narrow streets were designed to confuse invading armies. Those cozy buildings pressed together like old friends were built that way to share heat and maximize precious space within protective walls. European cities are beautiful not despite their medieval constraints, but because of them. They remind us that even in our darkest moments, humans can adapt, survive, and create something wonderful. What started as a desperate strategy for survival in the Dark Ages became the foundation for some of the most beloved places on Earth. And that might be the most hopeful lesson of all. That beauty can emerge from struggle, that community can grow from necessity, and that the things we treasure most are often born from the times we thought we couldn't survive. Alright, history lovers, if this completely changed how you see European cities, smash that like button and hit subscribe for more mind-blowing stories. What's your favorite European city and why? Drop your thoughts below.